Why am I changing?
12 young men kill themselves every week in the United Kingdom alone. That's over 600 deaths a year. As research shows, men are leading busier and more stressful lives. With the power of the media, could it do more to educate men on how to deal with their problems? In the last 5 years, men aged under 35 now view their friends and social lives as essential, and 3 in 10 men actually worry about the possibility of losing their friends.
I thought you were only here for 8 weeks in total.
But one thing this age group doesn't do is talk about their problems and feelings. Arthur Tomlinson and Tony Cox run Papyrus, a voluntary organisation set up to prevent young suicides. Arthur started the organisation after his son committed suicide 9 years ago, aged just 25.
But you do have in today's society, I think there's certain changing roles where there's probably, because of unemployment maybe in traditional industries and things like that, women are taking far more professional jobs, and maybe there's a lot of competition nowadays between young men and young women, and this could also have effect on the young men. There is that sort of lack of maybe self-esteem which they really need to regain.
David Akinsanya is a television producer and director. In his youth, he had brushes with the law and suicide.
I spent a lot of time in my teens, 13, 14, 15, and I've got copies of suicide notes that I wrote where I seriously sat down and thought about it so many times. The main time I think where I prepared a rope and everything was when I was in Borstal. The last one, I suppose, was 3 years ago. I was depressed. I hadn't sought help from my doctor, and I was getting more and more depressed. The things that drove me to contemplating suicide were isolation, not being able to express myself.
You're more likely to find a young man, for instance, in casualty than you are in terms of GP surgeries, because they're more likely to have left things much, much later. There's a strong element within our makeup as men that says we're supposed to be self-healing, that we're supposed to be able to, those things will run their course.
With men not being encouraged to talk about their feelings or not knowing how to articulate them, in the worst cases this can lead to depression and then suicide. Although there are many reasons for this, one theory is men are not being educated on how to adapt to a changing world. Could the media have a role to play in this?
The media has a very strong role to play in educating young people, and should be used responsibly in portraying good role models for young people to follow, and in giving at least equal airtime with positive images rather than always focusing on the negative images of particularly young men. Generally, you see young lads being louts, drunks. The way the newspapers have reported that we're number one for teen pregnancies, drunkenness and drug abuse, gives the wrong impression.
The media are presenting materials which are for mature audiences, and many of those programmes are being seen, thought about, reacted to by relatively immature young people.
It isn't the overt images that would worry me, it is effectively the subliminal image. And it isn't violence, for example, that particularly worries me, a rather dangerous statement, it is aggression.
David Yates is a producer at Britain's highest rating breakfast show, GMTV. I asked him why there were so many programmes which inform and allow women to discuss their emotions, but very few, if any, for men.
I think that would just be led by the ad agencies, and they'd be looking at a specific group that they wanted to service or to sell to. And they decide that the males are very much in the, there's hardly any males watching at that time of day, and so obviously it goes over to female sort of populace.
I think what commissioning editors need to look at is how much output is aimed at women And it's not just women at home during the day anymore, you know, but how much of that is aimed at women and how much of that is aimed at men. And I think you'll find that there's actually an imbalance when it comes to talk programmes, when it comes to programmes about emotions, where it is more kind of aimed towards women. It's on during the day when a lot of people are at work. It's this whole kind of housewife thing, which doesn't work anymore anyway. But I think what they need to do is look at that and then look at the imbalance. And I think if anyone looked at that imbalance and looked at how men are emotionally supported through the media, television, magazines, all that, they will see that it's actually very orientated towards women.
The media are obviously there to sell whatever they're trying to sell. Yeah. Now what that means is that they go for safe markets. It's been really interesting watching the way that men's magazines have come into being. 6-7 years ago there were no men's magazines, and most publishers said this is not an area that's ready for work. Men are not magazine buyers. It took a couple of independents to get stuck in there, open up the market a bit, show that there was something there to be had, and then most of the big publishing companies have come in since. Now, I think men will always be that sort of grouping, that until the big media organisations are convinced, they'll either go the traditional line in the way that, say, Radio 5 has. Sport and news has always been viewed as men's territory.
But is this approach working?
Excuse me guys, have you got a second? What do you think of the way men are portrayed on television?
Really badly.
Certainly in Stokes they are very much the stereotype image.
What do you think of the way men are portrayed on television?
The stereotypes as being cavemen in many respects. I think the modern man's more in touch with his feminine side, so to speak.
Such as?
You know, we're not all cavemen sitting in men behaving badly, drinking the beer. It's more of a rounded male.
Although some view sports and lad culture as safe TV for men, could television be used as a way to educate men of the changing world and suicide?
I think no, because television is on for one reason, that is to sell. And if it's not selling, it won't be on, because they're all money-making, devices. Just because it's a TV program doesn't mean it'd be any more worthy than a pharmaceutical company or a farm. Everyone's there to make money. If they don't make money, it goes by the wayside. So there's no reason really why they should act out of any more altruistic, reason than anything else.
I try and reflect men that I see myself in. So I like to put men on television programs who are going to talk about their emotions, talk about how they feel.
I got nicked for burglary, ABH, GBH, criminal damage, everything. Inside of me there was still a little boy trying to find his way back, and I just couldn't.
If men talk about what it's about and we find out what it's all about, I mean, I think it is about the male's role in the society and the fact that we're expected to do, and we expect a lot of ourselves, but we can't always deliver that, especially in the changing kind of society we live in now. We are being left behind though, and I do think that it's down to broadcast, it's down to all the lads magazines, all these things to be addressing this.
I mean, what do you think of the current state of men in today's society?
I think they're in deep trouble. I think they are an endangered gender.
And if you look in women's magazines and stuff like that, you always see problems page. If you look at television that's aimed at women, it's always about problems and how we can deal with our lives. And then when you look at what is aimed at men, it's all trivial.
I think their plight in many respects, in the short term, is probably more serious, actually, than the plight addressed by feminism.
You only need one successful program to foster 10. So if there was one great show on death, you would see 5 within a year.
One of the things that the media could do is to define very carefully the difference between reflecting life and influencing our society.